What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart for those of you that are new. And today we have the second round of the play-in tournament here for Wednesday night on DraftKings. We have the Heat versus the 76ers, and then we have the Hawks versus the Bulls. So 100K to first, another big prize pool here for us to win and take down. Going to be breaking down this early look slate here. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let's get right into it. And I know a lot of you guys, one of the comments in that last video was just like, please stop saying that one of the teams wants to lose. I had to play into it a little bit. There was that little inkling that, could be a possibility, but I understand, no team's going to throw that game. But at the same time, no one wants to play Denver, but it looks like the Lakers do because they just won that game. So looks like they want to rematch. They have some motivation there after getting swept in the conference finals by Denver last year. So this is a quick look at my lineup for tonight. That is not it. That is the lineup that's winning right now. But as you can see, Jose Alvarado, 23 points. He had a really good game there in the second half. Here's my lineup. So I went with Fox, Mitchell, Jones, Green, Nance, Daniels, Williamson, and Sabonis. Herb Jones was just terrible. Very annoying there. Should have just went to Harrison Barnes. Cheaper. Going to play more minutes. Want to get a little bit different. Go to Herb Jones. Larry Nance was great. Surprised he wasn't a little bit more high owned there. Dyson Daniels was terrible. He's my last man in. It was between him and Jose Alvarado. Unfortunately, Dyson Daniels just didn't do much there, and Jose Alvarado kind of exploded in that second half, so that's frustrating. And then Zion did fantastic, but he got hurt the last, 3-4 minutes of that game. So he did miss some big minutes there because he was pretty much their whole offense. So he could have gone for another 5 to 10 fantasy points there, which would have really helped out. But we'll see, have a slight, I'd say a decent chance of cashing tonight. Nothing crazy, but let's break this game down here this slate down here for tomorrow night. So starting off with Miami here, the big, thing right now is that Terry Rozier is not going to play here for this game. And then Duncan Robinson looks like he should be good to go. So I'd expect a starting lineup of Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Duncan Robinson, and then we'll see what they kind of do with the last spots. Obviously with Embiid, they're going to want, obviously Bam out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go a little bit, kind of taller here, possibly some Highsmith for some defense, maybe Kevin Love spot start just to help out in terms of double teaming. Who knows? Right now, obviously it's very early, so let's kind of wait for the news there, but, could get a taller lineup here just to help out with Embiid. But I think the headache that's going to come from this game is going to be just what small forward / power forward is going to be kind of the best value play for the Heats because, they have Jaime, they have Martin. I would assume it's going to be one of those two that have a really, really good game off the bench there for the Heats. But right now, in terms of the starters, obviously Jimmy Butler, it's playoff Jimmy. He has not been the best at all this season. Kind of turned on a little bit in the second half of the season for a few weeks, then kind of fell off once again. But I expect, 40 plus minutes out of Jimmy Butler. So he looks great at 8-7. Expect the same thing out of Bam. Unless he gets in foul trouble, he's going to see close to 40 minutes. So they both look great at their price tags. And that Tyler Hero probably looks the best just in terms of, his upside, alongside Jimmy, alongside Bam. He has shown close to triple-double upside. So he's a little bit more, I'd say, up and down compared to those two. Not as steady, not as safe. But at 7-5, we know, the past few games he's been back, 31, 48, 36, 29, 29 minutes. So it looks like he's going to see full minutes there. So I expect all three of these guys, Butler, Bam, Tyler Hero, to all see close to 40 minutes. So they all look really, really good there. I think in order of kind of my favorite to least favorite, it'd probably be with how they're priced. That's kind of my order there. In terms of these kind of wings, as I said, going to be a headache in terms of Robinson, Jaime, and Martin, and which one kind of goes off. I honestly feel the safest probably with Martin. He showed last year in the playoffs, even though his minutes have kind of been down, they kind of preferred Jaime more. He's kind of turned it on in the playoffs. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has a good game there off the bench. Duncan, he's always been played just because of that 3-point threats. The minutes haven't been too great recently, even though he's kind of been battling with some injuries. But I would say expect at least 25 minutes out of Duncan. I'd say, maybe 20 out of Jaime, and then possibly, 25, possibly 30 out of, Martin. Obviously, in terms of minutes, the safest is obviously going to be Duncan, especially if he starts. But as I said, I'd kind of lean towards Martin just because of his playoff experience from last year, defensive versatility, can hit those shots. A guy like Jaime, he's been great, but a rookie in the playoffs, Spoelstra could go to Martin. So I kind of give this slight edge to Martin there in terms of him versus Jaime. And obviously Duncan Robinson, I say he's in level with Martin for me. He does have that safe ability. He's a little bit safer just because of the minutes he should see, the floor minutes, just because of that starting position. But honestly, in terms of all three, I think I feel the best in terms, or I feel the best going with Martin. Even though it might be a little bit riskier, I think I feel the best there. But all three are definitely in play in GPPs. And then in terms of these kind of the last three, Jovic, Highsmith, Love, I don't know how many minutes Jovic is going to get. He's been getting some spot starts. He's been doing okay here and there, but in the playoffs here, I just don't think they're going to go to him, especially at 4.4K. Don't love that. Highsmith, more of a defender. Even if he does start 3.9, I think he's an okay value play. The guy I really only have interest in off the bench here for Miami in terms of value is going to be Kevin Love. Hasn't been playing too much recently, but one of those guys he should see probably close to 15, if not closer to 20 minutes. Even if he starts, I wouldn't expect huge minutes, maybe, kind of low 20s. But one of those guys is, he can absolutely go off there in a little bit of amount of time just because of his playmaking ability to knock down threes. So a lot of interest in Kevin Love there, especially if he starts. But even if he comes off the bench, I do think he's a pretty solid value play. And that's really it. So that's kind of the breakdown for Miami. Moving on to Philadelphia here. Obviously, Embiid should be good to go here for this matchup against the Heat. Still questionable, but I expect him to be good to go. As you can see with his minutes, 36, 32, before that 23, obviously a blowout, 33, 29. So looks like he should be off a minutes limit close to 35, which is more than enough at 11.1. So he looks fantastic here. I really like Maxey. It's kind of like a contrarian play in this game. 8.5, everyone's going to be focused on like playoff Jimmy. They're going to be focusing on Embiid. I think Maxey's fantastic. We know he has huge upside there, even alongside Embiid. I expect more playmaking out of him, with Embiid opening up the floor, more three-point attempts for him. So I really, really like Maxey here as a contrarian play on the slate, 8.5. Him and Embiid look fantastic. I don't mind getting Tobias Harris. 6.2 is pretty cheap for Tobias. Third option here. So it's not like he's going to go too crazy offensively unless he starts off very hot. But we've seen games throughout the season where he can go for, anywhere from 29 to 40 fantasy points alongside those two main guys of Maxey and Embiid. So I think Tobias is a very, very intriguing play there at 6.2. Kelly Oubre should be coming off the bench here. I don't have much interest in him. He's just more so of a very contrarian play, but at 6,000, I do think he's definitely too expensive for coming off the bench. When you have a healthy team in terms of their offense, it's going to be through Embiid. It's going to be through Maxey. Harris is going to pick up that third kind of option there. So I don't see a ton of room for a guy like Kelly Oubre priced at 6,000, most likely coming off the bench, to be enough for me to have much interest in. The rest of the team here, I expect obviously them to throw minutes to Hield, Lowry, Reed. Melton's out, so they're not going to play him. And then I would assume Batum gets some minutes as well. Nothing too crazy here. They're all kind of priced about, kind of mid 4,000s here. I don't have a ton of interest. Like Hield has just not seen a ton of minutes. I expect, Oubre down to Batum to see all of them to see 15 to 22 minutes in that range. So they're in play. I just don't love it too much. I think Reed's probably the worst option out of that bunch. And then Lowry, I'd rather take a shot on Oubre, Hield, and Batum, just because they're a little bit better point per minute guys. Lowry just showed he's just not going to be aggressive offensively when he's out there, but it's the playoffs. I do think he's probably the safest floor in terms of just playmaking ability. But if I had to rank it here for you guys in terms of the bench, obviously Kelly Oubre looks the best, but he is priced at 6,000. Second favorite play would probably be Buddy, even though he's very, very scoring independent. Then I'd say Kyle Lowry's right behind him, and then I'd say Batum, and then Paul Reed is kind of how I kind of handle the bench there. I do think Campaign could kind of jump in there, get some minutes taken away from Kyle Lowry, which kind of muddies the waters there. But nothing too crazy here in terms of the guys I'm jumping out to really play in this first game. I do think a lot of people are going to stack the second game. Should be a lot higher scoring. Should be more free flowing offense. I'd say that first game is going to be kind of a grind there, but that could lead you to having a more contrarian lineup if you do attack that first slate, because most people are going to be attacking that second game. Moving on to the second game here, we have the Hawks versus Chicago. As I said, this should be a way better game to target. Two solid offenses and just two, bad defenses. Like, they're not the best there. So In terms of that, obviously Trae Young is going to be a super, super popular pick, but for good reason. 9.2 should see at least 35 minutes. No real mention of a minutes limit for him. He's been back, 3 games so far. They're going to want to win this game. So I expect, probably close to 35, maybe a little bit more minutes out of him. 9.2, that's definitely too cheap. DeJounte Murray with Trae Young back. I just don't see it at 8.8K. That is just way too pricey. At the beginning of the season throughout, he's kind of in that low 7 to high 7, low 8 range alongside Trae Young. So it's like he does have the ability to go for 40 plus, but at 8.8, you're just really screwing yourself over. Even if he does have a pretty solid game, you're going to need a really big game out of that price tag from him. So more so stay away from me. Clint Capella is fine, 6.8. Once again, don't love the price tag here. One of those guys, as you can see, they don't have many bigs to go to. Bruno Fernando has actually done well this season in terms of coming off the bench for Okongwu, who's been injured. But as you can see, the minutes still have not been the best for him. He does have that ability to go for double doubles. Kind of goes for on pretty much every single game. So it's like he does have some upside, but 6.8, I think it just makes him a fine play there. Bogdan is probably the second favorite play. Going to be pretty chalky just because he's one of those guys who should push for mid-30s minutes. Usually does pretty well against the Bulls. Obviously going to be more so a scorer here alongside DeJounte, alongside Trae Young. But with those two on the floor, it should open up a lot of three-point opportunities for a guy like Bogdan. So don't mind taking a shot at him at 6.4. He looks like a pretty strong play there. I think a great pivot off of Bogdan in terms of ownership should be DeAndre Hunter, another one of those guys. Should see at least 30 minutes, maybe push for mid-30s minutes. One of those guys who is, as you can see, pretty boom or bust, can go for, one of those games where he goes for 15, 20 fantasy points in 35 minutes, or he can go for like 35 to 45 fantasy points, depending on how many shots he's hitting down. So 5.9, you're getting him at a fine price tag, but he's kind of that more boomer bust pivot play off of what should be a pretty chalky Bogdanovich there. In terms of the rest of the team here, I expect Bruno Fernando to be a pretty popular value play. Should see around 20-ish minutes. Obviously, there's foul trouble for Capella. Bruno's going to be that main guy there off the bench. He's very, very foul prone, as you can see as well. So there is that risk that he gets more playing time and he just gets in foul trouble going against Vooch, who's pretty decent offensively. So that's the risk there. But at 4.5, he definitely looks like kind of the best value option across the board right now. So I would expect him to be super, super popular as a play to throw in there. But you also have to deal with, you have Embiid, you have Bam, you have Vooch. There's a lot of good center options to go to. But I still expect Bruno Fernando to be a very popular one. In terms of the rest of the team here, he'll see some minutes, but I just don't think there's a need to get to him at 4,000. That's really it. They've been playing Muhammad some minutes there, but it obviously was the last part of the season. I don't expect him to be in rotation at all. Maybe we see a little bit of Kobe Buffkin, but nothing crazy. So I really expect them to just go for a very tight rotation here. Trae Young, DeJounte, Bogdan, Capella, and Hunter, and then off the bench, just expect Bruno Fernando, maybe a little bit of it, and then maybe a little bit of like a Matthews or a second guy, just to kind of give these guys a rest. But I expect huge minutes out of the Hawks here. And with that in mind, they are definitely too cheap. All of them are too cheap besides DeJounte Murray is just a little bit overpriced. And I'd say same thing with Clint Capella. But when it comes to Bogdan, Trae Young, and DeAndre Hunter, they're all too cheap in terms of like how much minutes they should see for this game tomorrow. Moving on to Chicago here. Once again, same thing here. They're just way too cheap. Iowa is questionable, which obviously is decently big news because it definitely hurts or eats into the minutes of a guy like Caruso if he's back. Hurts a little bit of the playmaking across the board for these guys, but nothing too crazy there. And also Drummond is questionable as well. We've seen games throughout the season where Drummond's done very well against the Hawks. As you can see here on 4-1, he went for a double-double there, 13 and 18, 36 and a half fantasy points. I know this a little bit more throughout the season here, so I want to go back to them. Here, 16 minutes, he went for a 7 and 11. I know there's a few other games where he did pretty well against the Hawks throughout the season. So it's like right here, they've gone. There's a few times where Io has not played this year, and they've gone kind of big against the Hawks. But as you saw that last game, he had a monster game there against the Hawks. So I don't mind taking a shot at him at 4.7. I mean, he's correctly priced, definitely risky, but we know he has massive upside there, especially if Vooch gets in foul trouble. So he's going to be a popular kind of value dart throw GPP play, but for good reason. Monster double-double upside. But for the main guys here, as I said, the offense is going to go through DeRozan, Vooch, and Kobe White. Kobe White's been the worst out of those bunch so far. He's been picking up a little bit better recently in terms of just his efficiency, but he's been all over the board across the season. Had a couple great stretches, had a couple horrific stretches, but at 7,000, that's definitely too cheap there for him. even though it's kind of been the DeRozan show the last month and a half here for the Bulls. I don't mind jamming all three into the lineup. I mean, they're all very cheap. All three of these guys are going to see close to 40 minutes. Expect the same thing here with Caruso, especially if there's no aisle. Expect him to see mid-30s minutes. At 5.8, it doesn't feel great, but once again, one of those guys who can stuff the stat sheet, especially defensively. So this whole game looks just way too cheap. It's kind of like a Kings Warriors situation where everyone feels way too cheap across the board. It's just a way better game environment. So we'll see kind of how that game turns out tonight, but it's kind of a similar situation here with the Hawks, with the Bulls. So Evan's going to be going to this game. Evan's going to be pretty much stacking this game. So if you want to get different, it's going to Philadelphia, it's going to Miami, and it's going with a guy like Caleb Martin on the Miami side, possibly Bam, or on the Philly side, it's possibly going to a guy like Tyrese Maxey. But right now, I'm really liking kind of more of like a mid-range balanced build, just because there's just so many guys who are way too cheap here. So it's like, for this situation, I don't mind throwing in DeRozan, Vooch. To take Trae Young another, but Vooch. We'll throw in Kobe White. Can we fit in Trae Young? I think we can. Trae Young there, 3.3 left over, so not a ton, because there's not a lot of value when it comes to these playoff slates unless someone gets ruled out. But that's really it for the Bulls. Another one of those teams, they're going to play their starting five, huge minutes off the bench. Expect Drummond to get about 15ish minutes. Expect Terry to get maybe a tad, but I'd say more so. Expect Drummond. Expect Torrey Craig to kind of be that main value piece off the bench here for the Bulls. 3.6. I think he's worth taking a shot on, just because they're going to be pretty shorthanded, especially with the the news of Batum being out, as well as the possibility of Isle being out. But that's the big news there for the Bulls. If Isle's back in, even at 6.3, I definitely think he's firmly in play in a pretty solid pivot off of a guy like Kobe White if he's good to go, because he should see probably 30ish minutes off the bench there for them. Could push for a little bit more. So it's like the main six guys for the Bulls: DeRozan, Vooch, White, Io, Caruso are really strong plays there. And then Drummond, obviously really strong play there in terms of just GPP upside off the bench at 4.7. He's gonna be pretty in terms of just him versus Bruno. I'd give the upside to Bruno I give the slight edge to Bruno just because he's safer minutes. But in terms of upside, and especially winning GPPs, Drummond's going to be your guy. But if there's a huge disparity in terms of ownership, like if Drummond's going to be coming in at like 25, 30% owned, Bruno's going to be coming in at like 20%, 15% owned, I'd rather just go with Bruno just because of the ownership, because it's a 2-game slate. You're going to have to get this different somehow. And I think that'd be a solid way to pivot off of the ownership there would be going with Bruno. But that's more so an ownership thing. So we'll kind of have to wait for the ownership tomorrow afternoon to kind of see how people play this out. And especially with the IO news, it definitely does change how you could structure your lineup a little bit here with kind of pivoting off of Kobe possibilities. So right now, this is kind of the route I like going. I wouldn't mind possibly fading a guy like DeRozan here, and if you want to get a little bit different, going to a guy like Jimmy, paying up for that 300 more, or paying down for a guy like Tobias Harris, leaves you 4.4K left over, which you could throw in a guy like, as I mentioned, we'll go to power forward, Caleb Martin, 4.8, the 4.1 left over at small forward. Could throw in a Highsmith, but if you obviously move people around here, you can definitely make it work a little bit easier. But that's kind of the route I'm going. I'm more of a balanced build right now, but as I said, still have to wait for Embiid, and then we do have to still kind of wait for the Heat news there. Could be a possibility of taking a shot on Kevin Love. It would be nice if he was power forward eligible, so another center option there. So going to be a little bit tricky in terms of the centers, like who to go to, but we'll know more with the injury news tomorrow. But make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button. Do really appreciate all the support, and expect the PrizePicks videos to be back for the start of the playoffs here once these play-ins are done. So thank you guys. I'll see you guys next. Can't even talk. See you guys in the next video. Peace.